Hello, everybody. I'm here with Elizabeth Harris. Elizabeth, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Dave. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. I've read your story and I'm really excited for you to share it with other people. And I'm sure there's a lot that you have to share. As a matter of fact, in a lot of directions, because not only do you have your own personal story that has really shaped and modeled the life of yourself, your family, but your background is also, you have a strong health background as well, right?
Absolutely. I was in college and completed my degree for pre-medicine, biology and chemistry. And when I graduated, they just recommended to get a little bit of patient care experience before going to medical school. And so I went on to get essentially a master's in sports medicine. And the local gym hired me, and I was teaching aerobics, programming. I mean, I was all out VO2 max manually, just setting everybody up. I mean, I'm a very driven person, like since I was young. And so I was really excited to venture on this whole, personal training weight loss venture because the owner of the gym asked me to take over the nutrition system there inside the facility.
Okay.
Now, I had no business experience, but he had an MBA and he told me kind of what to do, and I just and hit the ground running. I really loved business. It was really fun, and I got to be in the gym. And it's funny because like I got pregnant and had my son, the son that was later diagnosed with this issue, and so thinking back, all the things that they want to say is like, oh, you didn't eat right, or you didn't work out, or you were smoking or drinking, all those things, or you weren't happy that could contribute to disease later in life. Like that was absolutely 110% not the case. And so that was kind of interesting and really a good thing that I was on that path. So I've really loved, helping people with physical fitness and weight loss for all my entire life.
Okay, and I'm going to read a little bit of your bio because you're going to tell most of your story. But this little bit,
Yep.
I want to read from what I've taken from uh, your publicist and what you guys have put out there. Elizabeth Harris is a best-selling author, founder of What's Wrong Wellness, and devoted mother whose journey began by successfully overcoming debilitating autoimmune diseases in her own family. Her books, What's Wrong with My Child and America is Infected, help people improve their skills at managing their family's health as well as understanding root causes of America's current health crisis. And one of those books is an Amazon bestseller. So you're our best-selling author.
Yes.
And and you just told us about, your education, your experience at the gym. But
Hmm.
then, of course, we know from this bio that I just read that really it sounds like life took you then in a very different direction with your children and with challenges you have with your children. And I know you speak extensively about this elsewhere, but it's such an important part of the story. Why don't you just give us like a synopsis of what happened next and where your life kind of went sideways as far as having to deal directly with issues your children experience?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because, when you get down the road, 2014, you're looking back to 2003 and you realize, oh, that's when it happened. But you didn't know it in 2003. So I'm just going to kind of tell it chronologically, even though I didn't realize what was happening until 10 years down the road when it was too late. And that's kind of
Okay.
why I feel like I'm really on this mission to share this with other people so they can recognize it a lot sooner. But
Yeah.
we had the business started thriving. I opted to not go to medical school because I just enjoyed it so much. And the owner of the gym just kind of gave me free reign to run it and grow it we had about 5 or 6 staff, and then we decided to have a second location here in Nashville. Moved down here, started that. I was really into body contouring. We'd added like synergy, cellulite reduction, endermology, skincare. And that was really helpful when people were losing weight because they would be able to tighten their skin as they were losing.
Hmm.
And then their inch loss
Yeah.
was really great. But the one thing I noticed was that I had all these clients that were trying really, really hard. And this was something I noticed before the story happened is like, I would be at the gym 6 a.m. So would they. I mean, we would count calories. I mean, and it was just like this thing where it's like, okay, it worked for some people, and for some people, it didn't really work. And so either they were lying or there was something wrong with I mean, it was just, basically back then everybody told us they were lying, but I didn't think they looked like they were lying, you know? And so I've got this in the back of my head. And then, when we get down to Nashville and we're growing the spa and things are going great, we had decided to add a salon. Well, my brother-in-law at the time had a little bit of problems with addiction, maybe kind of small ones, if you would, and he had gone to a rehab down in Texas. Well, he was apparently doing real well, and so he wanted to come stay with us and help, and we let him. And so when he moved in, and of course I did not make the connection at the time, about 9 days later, we all got very sick. Like what they talk about COVID now, like how sick you get, we got that sick then. And nobody knew what
Wow.
was wrong. And yeah, and the pediatrician at the time was like, "Oh, it'll blow over. It's just the flu." Well, I was like, I'd never had the flu before, and so I just believed it. But it was 9 days of just, I don't know, maybe 12 days of not even. So anyway, after that resolves, we end up with kind of these boils on us. Now
Holy
looking
cow.
back, MRSA, but nobody knew what MRSA was.
Oh,
Nobody
wow.
had a clue what MRSA was.
Right.
So it's like nobody knew. And so I was trying to figure it out myself, taking Bactrim, doing what I could do, kind of got it cleared up. Well, my brother-in-law relapsed again, and then he just went kind of crazy working at the spa. And so when you're walking through this, like just in life, and you don't have this information, it took me 10 years to get, you're like, okay, he's got mental health issues, which of course we jumped on that bandwagon. But I remember looking at him and he would just look almost psychotic, or his eyes were wide, and but other times
Hmm.
he'd be like amazingly awesome and kind. And I mean, this would go on for months. And then he would have this little uptick in these crazy symptoms, I guess you would call them. And
Okay.
so we thought, we got to let him go. So we did. So fast forward 8 years. My we got a divorce. My husband and I did.
Hmm.
Things were going kind of hard for him. He seemed to be depressed. Looking back, probably
Hmm.
chronic fatigue. They
Wow.
look the same. So we're thinking this, that. And so next year, I'm working a lot. By this time, I'm training at spa shows. I've developed my own cellulite reduction device called the CelluSleek. I've got my own skincare line. And so I'm blowing and going all over the country consulting. And so there was a plausible explanation for my fingers to start going kind of numb. When I
Hmm.
wake up in the morning and my neck was kind of hurting, and I worked out all the time. But they started getting really numb, like after a year. But I just kept blowing it off,
Hmm.
thinking it's the stress or carrying stuff through the airports. Anyway, the next year, 2000, I guess 10 or 11, it kind of all runs together. But my son got a case of strep throat. Now, by this time, we had adopted two additional children. So I have two biological children and two adopted children from the Department of Children's Services. I mean, and they were great. So this is like 3 or 4 years earlier when things were still on track. And
Right.
so I've got these two children that are not genetically mine, and then I've got two that are. And I didn't realize how important that would be to the story later. But
Hmm.
my biological child comes down with strep. Okay. And that's just strep throat. But this time it was in his stomach. So he's rolling around on the floor. And a lot of
Hmm.
times now I know strep is not always in the throat, and they can't find it with a quick strep test. And they've got to do blood draws. There can be
Oh,
perianal strep, there can be skin strep. Group A strep can be found in so many places. And also, pediatricians and physicians don't realize the latent variability of this organism. So it doesn't just go away on its own. I mean, it can hang around
right.
for 4 or 6 months and just lay in there and just cause all kinds of problems. But it
Wow.
typically won't unless there is another variable.
Okay.
And so the variable is what I'm here to talk about. But the bottom line is, a couple of weeks after he was diagnosed with this strep throat, I guess he just turned 11 at the time. About 2 weeks after, he began exhibiting very bizarre behaviors. OCD extreme. Of course, I didn't recognize it as that because I didn't know what it was. Buttoning his shirt up and down, walking back and forth across the transition strip, making a tent that was like not a normal tent. Like you make a tent. We all know what a tent is. It's cool to make a tent. This kid like drug every chair in the house. It was a 5,000 square foot house. It's a lot of chairs. Every blanket, every sheet. I mean, it was like taking up the living room. And then I just noticed he was like closing in the spaces. So I
Mhm.
was like, whoa. Now he had been picky. So earlier in his life, when he was young, he'd been picky about the clothes he wore. He didn't like this, didn't like that. He did have night terrors. He seemed to be perfectionistic, but he'd been diagnosed with ADHD in the third grade. But other than that, pretty normal. I guess ADHD is normal now, right? So
Pretty widespread. Yeah.
seems to be not a big deal. So I mean, to this point, I hadn't really been that worried. I mean, and of course, like the divorce is going to be stressful. So I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
some of that probably worsened it. But this after the strep was next level. I called the pediatrician and he's like, "Oh, that's probably just playing hide and go seek." And I'm like, "Huh?" But when you're healthy, you don't go to the doctor much. So I haven't been to
Right.
the doctor in 15 years, so I didn't know how to navigate that system. But the third day, I called a colleague of mine because my son was crouched behind the chair with eye pupils huge, and I mean terrified. He said
Wow.
bugs were crawling on him, and people were watching him. And called the doctor's office again, and I was like, okay, there's something really wrong. It's a different doctor. He said this sounds like an acute onset of pandas. Of course, I'm like, what's pandas? So I'm
Right.
Googling it, and I saw that it stood for pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorders associated with streptococcal infections. And I'm like,
Wow.
huh? Yeah, wow.
Didn't learn that in pre-med. I've never heard of it before.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm like, because the only thing, and so I'm like, okay, so there's only one website at the time because it just been newly
Huh.
identified 6 months
Wow.
earlier, which I didn't really know that part. I just knew that there was one website and it said the common denominator was these kids have anti-DNase-B high titers of that, which is actually group B strep. So I was like, okay, what's going on here? But the bottom line is, we were sent to the emergency room, and I didn't know that they didn't know anything about it. I just thought it was a common thing, and the doctor picked up on it, and we were going to go get it taken care of. So we
Right.
get there. No, we get there, and I'm like, okay, we're here to see the panda specialist. I mean,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
to see the panda specialist. No, they wrote all kinds of things in my chart and called the psychiatrist. Now, they did also call the neurologist and several other teams in. They did end up admitting him and doing a spinal tap. And later on, I would find out that he also had pneumonia simultaneously.
Wow.
But they didn't tell me that, and sometimes you have to get the full legal medical record to figure that out. So, this thing that started in 2003 when we were exposed to this, what I would later find out to be a genetically modified version of mycoplasma pneumonia, had kind of stayed with our family over this 10 to 12-year period and slowly sent us into a psychiatric addiction, physical nosedive.
Wow.
And I wouldn't find out for 3 more years, what was really causing it. We would go through 50 doctors for him, 50 for me. I end up being diagnosed with something called complex regional pain syndrome, which has no cure. And I'm supposed to be
Nice.
in a wheelchair and on horse ketamine, and there's no treatment other than, and I'm like, what is going on? Because all these, hello, these are like some really bad diseases here. I didn't even ever know existed. And then I just
Yeah.
started, open my eyes to everything and saying, there's a lot of diseases everywhere, that didn't used to exist when I was in school or even when I was in college. Because, see, I went through biochemistry and all those things back 25 years ago. And I really did pay attention. I have a little tape recorder,
Yeah.
wrote it out. And now nothing was making sense with all the different confusing elements.
How did you
So,
finally get a true diagnosis with all the mess and difficulty? I mean, basically, it sounds to me like you had years, like not weeks, not months. Many people deal with sickness for days
right,
or for weeks. When it gets
right.
into months, that's horrific. But now we're talking many years for your family,
We're
right?
talking a decade of very extreme, and probably the decade before when we didn't really know what was going on.
And
Yeah.
so, how did you finally find the key to the lock?
Well, we ended up in the entangled with the juvenile detention. center here in Williamson County. And this in particular judge was, I mean, about as cruel a person as you would ever want to meet. She put my son in a solitary confinement cell for 5 weeks and gave him PTSD. I mean, now his symptoms were extreme, but they were symptoms. We just couldn't get them. They're supposed to, these kids need antibiotics because what actually happens is their immune system responds to infection with psychiatric symptoms rather than
Wow.
traditional symptoms of infection. So this whole time I'm thinking strep, 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 but then come to find out it's really literally anything that can exacerbate their immune system. So for instance, if they've got allergies, that could be a 2 or 5 day flare up. You know, if they get stressed out, that's like however long it takes for the cortisol go up and down in the bloodstream. And so there's all these things that I ended up putting it all together when honestly I was just scared for him to be taken away from me because I knew if that happened. So I went out on my own and we'd been to so many doctors, so many specialists. We'd lost everything, lost the house. And I was like, he did IVIG, some antibiotics. I found one doctor, Rosario Trifoletti, and he ran some lab work. And literally the only thing my son had wrong with him was a mycoplasma infection and high strep pneumotiters, which is sinuses. So I'm
mycoplasma infection.
Mycoplasma pneumonia. And it's basically yeah. And there's many strains of it, but it's basically walking pneumonia. Now, here's the kicker is over that summer when I decided to get the full legal medical record since his birth and then read the whole thing and try to figure it out on my own as best I could, my adopted daughter started acting way out of character, slamming doors. This is called oppositional defiance disorder, anxiety, staying up all night, losing a lot of weight. But, you know, when they're on the ADHD meds, and I'm like, all these kids have ADHD? Anyway, so once I had realized that she leaned down and showed me this big boil behind her ear, I just went, okay, I'm living in a science fiction movie here, and I actually know what I see, and I'm confident enough to go take her to the doctor and know not to tell him what I think. So I took her, and I was like, "Can she have some antibiotics?" Because they wouldn't give any to my son. And once she started that course of antibiotics, within about 4 days, she was nice and sweet as pie again. And I just thought, so psychiatric symptoms are infectious. And it just kind of all started dawning on me, clicking, and I started looking around and noticing. But at the point, I didn't know what our problem was. The way that I found that out was in the records. I just traced it all the way through, and I noticed that whatever my son had as a young child, it was resistant. And he'd been in and out of the hospital with pneumonia several times. But what I thought was fascinating, if it hadn't been happening to me, it would have been more fascinating. But the fact that, you know, when he was young, he got fevers, he got ear infections, he got sore throats, sinus infections, all the physical symptoms. But I noticed that as he got a little bit older, like 3, 4, 5, the fevers got a little bit lower, like 103, 102, 101. And then he started getting ADHD and anxiety. And so it didn't happen overnight. It was this slow, misdirected immune response that had evolved over time because this resistant organism was present. And so when I came to find out that the mycoplasma pneumonia that we had contracted from my brother-in-law in 2003 was the cause, then I dug in deeper, trying to figure out where did this come from. And I learned that back in the 80s, they were the Army Pathology Lab, the DOD, Baylor University, and the Texas prison system all kind of got together, and they were doing some testing on some, I guess it was bioweapons possibly, and tested them in the Texas prison inmates. Okay, now that's plausible. I mean, it's disgusting to me, but I'm like, okay, so what happened next?
Well, it wouldn't be the only experiment. I mean, this is 50s or 60s or when was it?
This was like the 80s.
The 80s.
Mid-70s and the 80s, right when all this stuff starts to take off. So while I was not on a quest to learn all this, I was only trying to figure out how to keep my son alive. I couldn't help but learn it, you know? And I'm like, I learned that, because the only thing my son has is a mycoplasma infection. That's it. We had his genes tested. He didn't have the gene for any of his 27 diagnoses, physical or
Yeah.
psychiatric, nothing.
Wow.
I'm sick. I'm down to 123 pounds. I look like I've got cancer. My hair is falling out. I'm like on stage 3. My daughter has a bulb behind her ear. And believe it or not, the year before it, we had adopted a dog. And I'm going to tell you, because I just said, it's got to be the mycoplasma pneumonia. I know we're not coughing and hacking. We don't have walking pneumonia, but that's the only thing that makes sense because that's what he has. Do I have that? Is that what's causing my symptoms? Was that what's happening right now? Because so
Yeah.
I start researching it and there's nothing on it except Dr. Nicholson out in California. And I got on his website and that's where I learned about the testing. Okay. In his information and his research, now this is one of the most cited scientists in the world of all times. He's the one that discovered the phospholipid membrane of our cell. And I learned that back 25 years ago. So when I saw his name, of course, I immediately trusted him as, accurate and intelligent, all those things. And so I was reading through the documentation and I was like, learning about how it causes the autism, about how this happened in the Gulf War, how they tested it in the Texas prison systems, and there was another strain over there, and that those vets brought it back to their wives who got the fibromyalgia and the chronic fatigue, and then their kids had the autism, and then the rheumatoid arthritis, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm already like, I don't know if I really want to know all this. Because we're infected with a modified mycoplasma organism. It has been modified to be more heat resistant. It's antibiotic resistant. It's got virus parts spliced in it. And what are we going to do? And so,
the theory is that this started out in a lab and was tested on inmates and possibly others, might have been used as a biological weapon, and now it's spread and it's prevalent.
Very prevalent. In fact, there was the more I dug in, I guess the more obsessed I got with it because I was furious, and anger can drive a lot of things. So, even the head researcher, I won't name the institution, so that we've all been exposed to it at this point in time. And it's just, how did our immune system handle it? How virulent was the strain? But in the readings, I learned that your animals can catch the organism from the owners. So immediately, our animals that we had taken great care of that had died an early death all flashed before my eyes.
Oh,
and
wow.
and so then I remember the dog that we had just got a year earlier. When we brought him home, he started reverse sneezing and having these symptoms. Of course, immediately I'm like, he's got kennel cough. You've got to give him antibiotics. They're like, no, he doesn't have any doggy diseases. So they give him like 10 days of antibiotics. And I said, okay, if this story is true, I believe Dr. Nicholson and it's adding up, but I need more proof. Then our dog would have it. So I ended up taking him to the vet, and it was a hard pill to get that vet to swallow and test him up the nose, PCR testing back that many years ago. And sent it off because he's positive. So the dog's positive. So now we got 2 positives in the house. Yep. Now we got 2 positives.
So it's fairly easy to diagnose when you know what you're looking for.
If you know what you're looking for, but it is not, physicians will not consider it. You've got to have a very out of the box physician to consider this as the root.
But the test is easily available.
Easily available if you know a doctor that will order it. Sometimes it's not available on the formulary. So it was quite the zigzag. But the treatment is several years of antibiotics, and of course nobody would give us those. I was able to get my diagnosis and get the test positive.
Well, I do a health podcast, and I can tell you right now that several years of antibiotics, like that phrase, it's not going to fly with very many health professionals, right? Like, I see where you're coming from, but I'm telling you, many, many people in the health profession think that antibiotics are essentially the devil, right?
Exactly. Well, yeah.
This is a real uphill battle.
Oh, it was harder to get antibiotics than it was to get narcotics. Like I was on hydrocodone, I was on nerve blocks by the time this thing was in full swing, Cymbalta, Lyrica, Flexeril. And I'm like, can we just have some penicillin? Nope. So
Okay.
anyway, we ordered ours from India and we did the protocol and I oversaw it the best I could because I didn't have any, education on it or help or guidance, and we got through it. And
And
we're
when you
both
say we, this is, I'm just trying to keep up with the time frames here. You still have the 4 children all at
still
home
have the 4 children. Nope.
and the dog.
The dog is alive and well. The
Wonderful.
dog
Okay.
did, and we
So,
have another dog now. Yeah.
so the
But
we in this story is you got the drugs from India, and you, the 4 children, and the dog all go on the
the,
protocol.
the older
Okay.
child had already moved out. So
Okay.
myself and the 3 small children, 2
Okay.
adopted, myself, the dog, and we just stayed the course. We stayed the course, come hell or high
For
water.
2 years.
It ended up being a little bit more than that because I didn't know
Wow.
really what I was doing or how to support other things while I was doing it,
Okay.
and so we just plowed through. No, I mean, it's not that hard of a decision when it's either this or death. You gotta go. And
Yeah.
so we ended up, I mean, I don't have complex regional pain syndrome anymore. Now I do have the confused antibody. So if I get a strep infection or if I caught mycoplasma again, I'll have a flare up, which I let my guard down and came off the antibiotics, and that's what happened. And so I'm back on them. And so it's like for us, that's the best choice. However, I was able to get on a path where I learned a lot about nutraceuticals. And so
Mhm.
now we help a lot of clients we have a Zyto scanner and nutraceuticals, and we're able to get people a lot better using these natural products that are very much effective.
Well, the antibiotics that you're doing long term, my hope here is that they're not causing, a lot of unwanted additional problems, stomach, there's a lot of talk about gut health right now. It's something that we're much more aware of than we used to be. And so talk to us about that. I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, obviously, the choice between treatment and death,
Yeah.
we'd rather be on a treatment. I
I
get
think
it.
I can fix a gut. Yeah, yeah, easier than
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
going
yeah.
on over here. Yeah. No, but
But
yeah, you're
how do you
right.
deal with ongoing antibiotic intake?
Well, here's the thing is like, when I just thought antibiotics were antibiotics, I didn't realize there's like 50 kinds in classes and they target
Yeah,
different organisms. There's different mechanisms of action. Our body is
yeah,
like 72 trillion, made up 72 trillion bacteria and different viruses, some good, some bad. And
right,
so the bottom line is when you do ingest an antibiotic, it doesn't automatically target every single bacteria in your body. It just, targets some of them. And so a probiotic should do it. But doxycycline and minocycline, the tetracycline family, you have to be a little careful before the age of 8 with younger children. But actually, newer research shows that's not as much of a problem in terms of like the stained teeth. But low dose, long term has been well studied, well tested,
okay.
and there's not really any problems with the microbiome. And I'm really glad you brought up the gut because when I first wrote America's Infected, I was invited on to the Alex Jones show. Now, don't judge me because I didn't know. I did not know.
It's a lot
Then
of
when I got,
publicity. I get it. Like, yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Great disclaimer. But
yeah.
hey, you went on the show and
Went on the show and I was like, "Ooh, this is cool," But then when I heard this Sandy Hook thing, I was like, "No, I don't agree with everything he says." But
yeah, yeah,
went
yeah,
on the
of course.
show, and it's just like, the bottom line is they let me meet with that doctor group. His
Mm.
doctor that like formulates everything. I got to see the lab. I did not know that he was the one that like wrote the gut book. He's the one that came up with the theory, the gut theory. So we're sitting there across from each other and I'm listening to him and he's listening to me and I'm like, so let me just ask you something. When you guys were sitting around talking about the whole gut thing, did you guys ever stop and consider that if there is a colony or colonization and the ethmoid sinuses, which is the spongy bone, and the mucus that's secreted is already pathogenic, then it's going to continue to contaminate the gut? And he just said, no, we did not. And the next year he came out with Mycoplasma ZX and a probiotic. And I was like, there you go. So it's a
Wow.
big term connection. And it's like you're saying the
Yeah.
long-term antibiotics, there have to be done in cycles. So it's like 6-week cycles. 6 weeks of Cipro, 6 weeks of Zithromax, 6 weeks of Biax, and 6 weeks. So it's just cycling through. And so antivirals, none of us have had any gut problems. I hate to but I'm like, it's funny because I don't belong to any group at all. I don't believe that the vaccines are causational. I believe they trigger the underlying, which is this. I don't believe the antibiotics and the hormones are the root. I believe that the fact that we're not treating long enough and we're not testing for what organism it is, we're not testing susceptibility, and we are really just completely ignoring the fact that there are intracellular organisms that live inside of our cells that antibiotics cannot get to, that just happen to be inherently resistant to amoxicillin, which is what we all get when we go.
Okay, so let's cut to the chase as far as America is infected.
America is infected. America is definitely infected. Now it's even more infected over this last 2 years.
Yeah. But in regards to, let's go back before COVID. And when you're saying America's infected, so how many, what are we talking about? Percentages and who, and is there certain demographics? So let's talk about that. How big is the problem in your estimation?
The problem is magnanimous. The problem is children with ADHD. Now, there's a lot of nuances, and I think it's important to read the book because there is the evolution of this other bacteria that happened simultaneously, which made this problem very hard to figure out. But the autism, the psych hospitals are overflowing. These behavioral health facilities, the school shootings, all the autoimmune diseases, on and on and on and on. What I've come to learn and believe with every fiber of my being is that these chronic diseases are from multi-infectious syndrome, basically. It's just many organisms, because once you have one, you slowly become immunocompromised. And when I say we did everything in the book, we did everything in the book. We cut out milk. We cut out this.
Yeah. Elimination diet, and
we did everything.
You're just eliminating the wrong stuff because you got something in your body that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Okay, so if the problem's big, so people listening ought to be aware of it. And what do they do?
Well, the thing about it is once you are aware, you've got this, and it's I talk to doctors, and it's we totally believe you, because 33% of our patients, are fine, and our protocols work. They come in, it works out, they get better, they go home. There's this middle 33% that are a little wonky, but it doesn't really affect them to where they're dysfunctioning. They're still okay. They can hold it together. Maybe if they worked out, changed their diet. But then there's this 33% that we just don't know what to do with. And so that's the 33% I'm talking to right now.
Okay.
And that's the 33% that you might not be in that group, but certainly people in that group. And so it's just very important to get this message to them, because they don't have to continue suffering like this.
But what do they do? Who does the test?
Well, that's what I've decided to I just said, no charge. Anybody can just reach out to me. I've got hundreds and hundreds of peer-reviewed articles. I'll help you take it to your doctor, make your argument. We'll try our best that route. We'll educate, So we have several resources. We have a researcher on staff. We have teledoctor on staff we can, use. So the best bet is I've just been filtering people and kind of helping see, okay, they might, have this, go here. But if you walk into some place and tell them you've got mycoplasma pneumonia that's causing your IBS, you're going to be left in the hospital. So do not do that.
Right.
Do not do that.
Right.
So what you have to do is you have to find the research. And I found it because I went back to medical school in January and I took 2 classes. Enough to build up my EndNote library. So it's if you have a certain diagnosis, tell me what your diagnosis is. We can send you peer-reviewed research that ties that diagnosis to this particular organism, and then you can kind of start to make your case.
Okay, fantastic. So, and they can contact you how?
Elizabeth at what'swrongwellness.com or info@what'swrongwellness.com. Any of those email addresses. Take a look at our website. I highly recommend reading the book. Becoming familiar with it, and then possibly, if you need treatment, we're here to help you get to the right places.
Fantastic. I want to segue for a minute.
Yep.
Because in your backstory, as you're going along, you spent all that time at the gym. You have a master's degree. You're very well educated. You were a leader in a gym and dealt with multiple aspects of health and wellness during that time as well. And uh, I almost broke out laughing at one section where I don't remember your exact words, but it was something along the lines of some people lose weight, some people don't, some people just are frustrated. And I don't remember exactly how you said that, but we go through this on a regular basis. We have a weight loss product, Pounds and Inches Drops. And every now and then someone will write about it, or we'll get some publicity, or an influencer will lose 40 pounds and publish it on Instagram. And we'll sell thousands of bottles in weeks when those events happen. We just had one, First for Women magazine published an article. And it wasn't a paid ad, nothing like that. It was just an article, how to lose 45 pounds by Christmas. They published that like November and said, make sure and take a product like Nairobi's Pounds and Inches Drops.
Wow.
These things happen. There are events, right? These events happen. And the same thing happens with glutathione, interestingly. Glutathione is an amazing antioxidant. WebMD calls it the mother of antioxidants. It ties well into this story, but this is not about me, it's about you.
But absolutely. No, absolutely.
But the same thing happens, right?
Yes.
Where we have this surge. Well, we're going through that right now. And it's so our Facebook group blows up, our support blows up, and it's 3 different groups. Number 1 is the happy group. This is awesome. I love this. I've lost 17 pounds in 2 weeks. I've lost 4 pounds, 10 pounds, 20 pounds, whatever. And they're just raving about it. They get on auto ship. They just love it. The next group is neither happy or unhappy, but they're wanting to move forward, but they're wondering why everyone else is having so much success because their body's just not changing. Okay. And then the third group is unhappy. This doesn't work. Nothing's happening. I hate you guys. Give me back my money.
Money. So you got the same distribution. Cool. No, that's
same distribution. Roughly. You don't know, because the problem is the happy people are the ones you often don't hear that much from, right? Like we know from marketing statistics that people who are unhappy are 7 times louder and a 7 times bigger group than those who are happy. So we don't really know, but we want them all to be happy, obviously. Right? So Elizabeth, you've dealt with the same stuff. And so let's talk to the middle group and the angry group.
Let's talk to the middle group and the angry group. Absolutely.
I'm a health coach like you. I'm a certified nutrition coach. I don't have as much education as you or anything like that, but I'm a certified nutrition coach. And my goal as a health professional is to help people achieve their goals. And it frustrates me as much as it frustrates them because I want them to be successful. But some people, for whatever reason, they do the right things. Remember you said how you don't believe they're lying?
Right.
I don't either. I think there are some. Don't get me wrong. Of course, there's people, there's always a handful of people. We all do it sometimes. I lie to myself sometimes. I'm sure you do. We all do sometimes. But we're not all chronic liars, right? Like, if we're going to do a health change for a month, we're not just going to lie to our coach and say, I ate perfectly when we ate nothing but Twinkie and coffee and beer.
Right.
Like,
yeah, you got to have really something wrong with you to go to that level. Yeah.
Okay, so let's assume they're not lying.
Okay.
But the needle isn't moving, even when they've changed their diet, eliminated a bunch of crap, taking a supplement that should help, and the needle's not moving. What do we have to say to them?
I mean, I watched it for 15 years. I watched it like I was doing Synergy, and I was obsessed with what you're doing now. Back in 2001, through 2006, we would do Synergy treatments. I mean, I would try so hard. Like I would just call them in the morning, report to. I mean, it was like, anyway. But the thing is that like it was a certain population. As I did Synergy treatments, and then as we moved into CelluSleek, what I started noticing. And I developed the CelluSleek device because I noticed that the population, like as the years went on, their thighs, this is really weird, their thighs became more congested and like toxic. And I didn't know what it was. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I mean, we had to palpate the lymph nodes because we then got lipomassage, which is like this Brazilian cellulite reduction massage. Of course, I'm like, anything I could get. So then on that treatment, we had to fill the lymph nodes. And I'm like, some of these people have swollen lymph nodes. So it's like this evolution of like me already putting some things together. But then I realized, okay, there's something wrong with y'all's lymph systems. So then
Okay.
naturally so speeding up the lymph system does help. Does it help them lose weight? A little bit. We can help them reduce inches with like body rubs and things like that. But why are they not losing pounds? And so of course, when I found this out, back in time, because here's the thing, this organism, get this. I was sitting there going, are you kidding me right now? It has an incomplete metabolic pathway. That means it does not possess the ability to break down proteins. It can only break down simple sugars. So can you say alcoholics and even not quite that, but and people that want to have a lot of sugar, because these organisms make you crave those things. B, they are bacteria, but they have the properties of a virus, but they act as a parasite because they can't make their own nutrients. They suck ours dry. And so they take
Okay.
our vitamin D, anything that our immune system needs to fight, and anything that our it slows our whole metabolic process down. So of course I dove into that. So I'm like, I get it. So you got this, it's slowly slowing your whole immune system down. When you can see people's skin, I would do, watch a certain treatment being done, and all of a sudden they'd have this reaction that was abnormal. I mean, now those reactions are a lot more normal, but it is just growing and growing. And like the glutathione is great. Like if you want to open up your detox pathways, because as you do start the clearing process, when you're clearing out these stressors, what we call them, your body is going to be overwhelmed with what's called die-off or Herxheimer response, because they're just like not able to survive in the environment and they start to leave your body. Well, that throws cytotoxins up and you get big problems. So the glutathione is amazing. I would love to try your product because I've been looking for some. We said, how I don't know if you used to be like this. I used to put no meds, absolutely no meds. This many calories equals a pound, 3,500 calories equals a pound. This many reps, this many days. I was like, opposite, and no meds, and it was funny because back in the day, the fin was the craze. Do you remember the fin?
Yeah.
The
Oh, I do.
combo.
Yeah. Nasty.
So I'm like, you guys just had me take over a weight loss center and forgot to mention that this file cabinet full of patients, half of them are suing because the fin has damaged their heart. So I'm cold calling them, just naturally. Hey, how's it going? And they're like, you here? I'm like, what in the world?
You killed me. Your gym is killing me.
And then I'm like, well, we have this new product. It's this fiber. So there I am. I don't know how I have them to come back. So, I don't know if you're aware, but like the next 10 years follows, they took that off the market. They reintroduced the phentermine alone. And, it's pretty successful. So I've been sending people there. I would love to have something like what you have available at the spa.
Well,
for that.
By the way, so my assistant will be sending you $100 voucher to our store. So you can you can put glutathione in the cart with a couple other things. So
that's excellent, because like glutathione is a staple. And then also like, it's so interesting because like learning all this, like I went with research nutritionals because come to find out Dr. Nicholson was involved in their formulation of their early products. And listen to what they do. They take cows, this immunologist does, infects them with said organism, and then milks them. And when they have their babies, the cistern, they extract the colostrum. So it's a food product, but it's a specifically targeted food product. I think that's pretty brilliant. And I'm like, we need more brilliant guys with, white knights, because we got a slew full of brilliant criminals right now that we gotta like offset.
You know what? Do you know what? There's another company who did it with chickens. And they put it in the egg. What's it called? I can't remember the term for it. There's a scientific term, but essentially all mothers pass immune response to children, whether through breast milk or in the case of mammals. But with chickens, the mother hen passes immune ability directly into the egg, right? And so they found out that when they make the hen have a high level of immunity, So by basically building up the immunity of the hen, then the hens have the eggs, and they take the eggs and they make extract. And we almost launched it as a product last year. I met these people at a supplement show a few years ago, and I was just fascinated
Fascinating.
with their story. And it's a powder or a tablet. You can just take it every day, and you're just basically eating, stuff that raises your immune ability, your immune response to stuff.
I mean, that's excellent. And it sounds like what you're describing is just, kind of a multi-immune transfer factor, if you will. And what that does is that'll boost your NT killer cells, really high. So what your immune system gets tired, because think about this overactive immune system, and it all makes sense because these organisms, Mycoplasma, Lyme, whatever, they were designed to drill into the tissues. And so they leave parts of their, they leave their antigens on our host cells. And so if you think about it, an antibody is created in response to signal that there's a foreign invader. So by the time the antibody is getting there, this organism only takes 3 hours to infect a cell. And so now you've got this crazy amount of antibodies that have been created against not only their antigens, but our host cell proteins. Confused antibodies, molecular mimicry, autoimmunity across the board.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying you should add that for your middle section. Add that, just the general one, probably. Now I have a general transfer factor multi-immune, and depending on how, sick someone is or what their symptoms are, I mean, a lot of people will just be fine with that, for a while.
Well, and I totally agree with that. And of course, people who are really suffering and who are listening to this and think that you might be able to help them, of course, they should contact you and eliminate, or find out, get a decent diagnosis to see if there's something here that you can help them through, and something that they can't really solve on their own. For the other 2/3 of people, I'm absolutely convinced that the only reason I didn't get COVID and I haven't been sick in the last few years is because of really 4 things. And number one is intermittent fasting. Because when I go from 6 p.m. at night and don't eat any food till 11 or 12 o'clock the next day, my immune system gets to function all night long. It's not digesting food. It's getting rid of pathogens, viruses, toxins, bacteria. It gets to do its job. And I'm absolutely convinced that is one of the best things we can do for our immune system. The other is drinking lots of water and not drinking much of anything else, right? Most of America is dehydrated. And then the other 2 is glutathione, which I talked about. I take 6 sprays of that every morning and 6 sprays every night. And I won't be without that stuff because it directly boosts the immune system. There's over 70,000 studies on NIH just on glutathione. And the other is minerals. I have my own product, Mimi's Miracle Minerals. And same thing, I take that product morning and night because trace minerals, most people are deficient in trace minerals. Now, of course, nutrition and all of the basics, everything else plays a part. But those 4 health habits, for those of you listening, I'm convinced, do those anyway.
Right. Yes. I mean, right. I mean, I'm doing all those things. Yeah, because that was my, that was my religion. I mean, not really, but, physical fitness and eating this way. And we grilled chicken and had, the meals that we had every night, it was just I really, really believed in that 100%. And I still do. Because I'll tell you, I can see a total uptick, especially in the diet process. If I eat wrong or something, I just don't feel good. And so, and now even learning this information makes it even that much more important because why do you want to feed your mycoplasma? Try to starve them out. If you actually pull and think about it, sugar feeds cancer. This is all the same thing. And so it's you can theoretically, not eat any sugar for 2.5 years, and possibly get yourself well. I just don't know how realistic it is in our society to be able to do that successfully. And if you have a child, it's kind of your responsibility to make sure, if they get better. But I 100% agree, because if I hadn't been so healthy in the beginning, I would have been so confused, about what was going on.
Yeah.
And so that way it was
Yeah.
just like a clean slate. Yeah, now that's rule it out. And then I'm like, look, only be one other thing. And so
Yeah.
then, post it. I mean, sleep. Sleep is so important for your immune system. It is the
Right.
number one thing, because when you are deep in sleep, you are absolutely right. That is when your immune system is just doing its best work. And I mean, if I go to bed even an hour, 2 hours late, even my son, now he still lives with me. He's 22 now. He's doing phenomenal. He's in college. He's got a couple years.
Mm.
He's like a brown belt jiu-jitsu. He's like an
Wow.
amazing guitar player. And so like he's a super great kid, but you just seen him in 2014. You'd have thought he might be the next Charles Manson. I mean, and that's what I'm
Wow.
saying. That's how upsetting this is to me, because, most parents, I don't know, they wouldn't have been able to do that. Now, I had been successful and I spent everything. We lost our house, but at the end of the day, a journey that cost me $1 million. I'm just like, I was like, how do I tell people? And so I really appreciate you having me on the show. And I love that is your whole, passion, is to help people, because that was mine too. And I stayed confused over that 33% for so long. And I just thought, what is going on? And now it just kind of all clicks. And I'm like, and then I'm like, do you have something autoimmune? And then I learned that psychiatric medications suppress your immune system, and that's why the symptoms get better. So it's like all kind of this facade, and it's just like, whatever.
Yeah. Wow.
Whatever. Pain meds suppress the immune system. I mean, it's just like, okay, but we can get those, but we can't get this. So, I mean, like yourself, we just have to do what we can to try to help people and point them in the right direction. And so glad to know about you, because honestly, I don't have the time to do the coaching at this point. So I found that like once I can get them, to a place where they're, in better shape, maybe a year, then they can lose weight much easier. Things just kind of happen, because if your cells are full of colonies of bacteria, clearly your own host DNA is not going to be able to function. Your metabolic processes are off, and your oxygen is probably being stolen by those little thieves in your cells that you don't even know are there. So it's like it's throwing this whole confusing problem into an already complex equation, And so I
Yeah.
think that the glutathione is great, the multi-immune. I'm just really excited about what you're doing. I'm sure you've helped so many people.
Well, we try. That's the goal, and I just love it. I love the whole health and wellness
Me too.
industry, and I like talking about it. That's why I do the podcast. The podcast doesn't make me any money. It takes a lot of time. It doesn't make me any money. As a matter of fact, it takes away from my business. To be honest,
Yes. Yes.
I've considered quitting it, and I thought, well, this is like the only. I don't want to be just another guy selling bottles of stuff to people. That's really the bottom line. There's too many people like that in the industry. Their products are low quality. They're really good at selling them, and at the end of the day, it doesn't really help anybody. And so for me, it's uh, I'm very proud of our company. I'm very proud of our products. And I don't think they're all things to all people. Like I said, I admit, there's some people are not going to be happy. It's why we have a money back guarantee. But again, in the supplement industry, if you're really good at graphic design and marketing and messaging, you
Yes.
can sell anything,
You can sell anything,
unfortunately. And
unfortunately.
so by having a podcast, it's a way of letting people know who I am, and that I'm, happy to
No,
interview people and give them all the information I can find and ways to improve their health. And that's what we're really trying to do.
I think it's fabulous. And I think the fact that you're open to there might be another variable is just like, so, I mean, it's so impressive, because, some people just take a position and they don't really want to learn because they've hung their hat on X and they don't want to,
Yeah.
so the fact that like you're considering things and that you also help your patients or clients, I'm sorry, I mean, it's just really, inspiring to me, because like it's that hands-on thing rather than that marketing. I mean, I know how to market. I can put a label on something and probably go pedal whatever. But it's like that's an ethics issue. It's like going through enough things to know what really works for somebody, or you don't put it on the market. So it's
Yeah.
really good to meet somebody so responsible with their clients.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. Tell everyone one more time, how do they reach out to you?
Sure. Contact us at Elizabeth at what'swrongwellness.com. Or, you can just go to the website, look around. There's an intake, there's a contact form. So once you get to the website, it should be pretty easy. And I'll send you the link so you can post it if you want to make it easier for people.
Absolutely. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a lot of fun to talk to you. Very interesting. A lot of
Thank
these things are
you.
new to me and just fascinating. And for those of you listening, contact Elizabeth. She also has the books. Tell us the name of your books one more time.
What's Wrong with My Child and America's Infected. I would start with What's Wrong with My Child. I was really angry, and America's Infected is 450 pages. So just
Okay.
go a few years later when I calm down. It's 200.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Well, again, thanks, Elizabeth, for being on the show.
thank you so much. I appreciate you having me, Dave. Bye bye.
Okay. And for those of you listening, this is Dave Sherwin wishing you health and success.